tell me where in the world is
crime in San Diego?
Welcome back to another episode of Where in the World is Crime in San Diego?
Welcome back, guys.
Oh, it has been difficult. This is actually behind the scenes. This is our third time trying to record this episode for you guys. We've had just difficulties after difficulties after difficulties. We're like, oh my gosh, are we going to get this episode for you guys? I understand we drop on Mondays. It's now halfway into Tuesday or whatever. I have no idea what day it is, but just know that we haven't forgotten about you guys. And yeah, this has been real difficult.
Third time's a charm, so.
But, you know, we hope you guys had a chance to listen to our previous episode, KK's Heroes, where we talk about Kyle Kraska and his near-death experience, where he got shot in front of his driveway at his house, and he was able to turn a negative into a positive.
And not just for him, but for the whole community, and something that he continues to do. Sometimes you see this and like they don't have the resources to keep going. And like they do like 1 or 2 years and then it stops. And something that's like on his now its 5th year and looks like it has no plans of stopping. It's amazing.
Oh yeah, totally agree. So that was excellent for him to switch that around and give recognition to, you know, the first responders and thanking them personally for saving his life. But leading into this episode, like I said, it's Mondays when we drop episodes, and this is for sure a case of the Mondays. Indeed. So real quick, this week's episode name is I Don't Like Mondays, which many people don't like Mondays. I don't know what it is. I really, like, for me, Mondays are my Fridays, and I love it.
Well, because it's your Friday, but for everybody else, it's a Monday.
Yeah.
And I mean, if anything, like Garfield's coined it to where it's a case of the Mondays.
Yeah, but it's just like, all right. But Angie, you have our sources and disclaimers to talk about.
So our disclaimers are gun violence, school shootings, and child endangerment and murder. And our sources are All Things Interesting, Murderpedia.com, San Diego Reader, CBS 8, Union Tribune, San Diego Police Museum.com, Daily UK, schoolshooters.info, Washington Post, and Oxygen.
It's a lot.
That was a mouthful.
So who are we talking about today? Let's introduce to you guys Brenda Ann Spencer, which she is the first American female elementary school shooter
in modern U.S. history. We looked this up. We thought it said it was the first school shooter ever, but no, that is false. Right.
Okay. Now, she was born on April 3rd, 1962. Her father is Wallace Spencer, and her mother is Dot Spencer. At a really young age, her parents divorced and separated, and she lived with her father in San Carlos, which is a neighborhood in Fletcher Hills, La Mesa. Patrick Henry High is pretty close to where she lived and grew up. And what was really interesting is that her father lived across the street from an elementary school, which was Grover Cleveland Elementary School. And it's a San Diego Unified School District. It was like right in the heart of San Diego. And her father and Brenda, they lived in poverty. They weren't very wealthy. They were very poor. The house was said to be like run down. They slept in the living room on the floor with their mattress. So that just kind of pictures like what kind of childhood upbringing like Brenda had. Not very good. She was 5'2". She was very like unusually thin. She had bright red hair. Her classmates described her as pretty crummy looking. So kind of like, I would imagine like messy hair, clothes.
Like low hygiene.
Yeah, low hygiene. I mean, clothes is probably like a little like worn and torn because they weren't able to afford very much, I'm assuming. And her teachers described her as an introvert. And they even questioned while she was in class if she was even awake. Well, she suffered from epilepsy. So that's where the whole, is she even awake, would come into play.
Okay. So it was an actual medical condition. It wasn't like she just didn't care and wanted to fall asleep.
Yeah. But one thing that she did excel in was photography. And she actually won the prize in a photography for a humane society. So like taking pictures of animals.
Oh, that's really cool.
So that's something like she was good at. Well, in 1978, this is where she's a teenager at this age. She's like 15, 16 at the time. And she becomes a troubled teen. She goes to a facility where it's for problem students that have what's referred to as truancy. So, or either that they're absent and they're not cleared. Like when you call in, or when you call in for your child.
Yeah,
to
when
be
you
sick.
ditch school.
Yeah. So she would ditch school. Okay. And this is where they told her parents that she was suicidal at that early 1978.
Okay. So there was already onset of red flags coming in.
Yeah. There's like, you know what? There's something wrong with your daughter. She needs help. Okay. During that summer of 78, she was arrested for shooting out the windows of Grover Cleveland Elementary School with the BB gun. And she went in there to burglarize it too. Okay. So that's a second red flag already as it is.
That's not even flags. That's like full on alarms.
Yeah. In December of 78, she was evaluated by a psychiatrist, and her probation officer was the one that recommended that she be admitted to a mental hospital, and her father declined permission. So her father is like, no, it's okay. I'm not going to let her go to something like that kind of facility.
I think it's also the times where like mental health wasn't recognized and it still had a stigma around it. So it could have just been like ego and pride of like, she's fine. There's nothing wrong with her. She's being a teenager kind of thing. The denial of it.
I agree with that. So Christmas of 78, her father gifted her a semi-automatic 22 caliber rifle with a telescopic sight and 500 rounds of ammunition. Okay?
500 rounds.
500 rounds and a rifle. Now, Spencer's later said to have quoted to say, I asked for a radio and I got a gun. And she later on said, it felt like my father wanted me to kill myself.
Wait a minute. Guns aren't cheap, even at that time.
No, they're not.
And neither was ammo. And if they're sleeping on a single mattress.
I mean, there's some money that had to come in. Her father worked at SDSU as an audio visual assistant. So he was making at least pretty good, decent paycheck.
No, I'm just saying like the prioritizing of like, using that money. Like you'd rather get her a gun than get her like
a nice set of clothes or a nice living situation. Yeah. Like the priorities are not set. So a week before January 29th, she told her classmates, I'm going to do something big for TV.
This is where the see something, say something comes in. Like there's always those like, again, big red flags or big markers that warn you. And once everybody starts talking like, hey, that was kind of odd, it ends up being these huge things that could have prevented such an event.
Oh, totally agree. There's red flags, and this is where we're at now.
Well, we'll get into the morning of January 29th, 1979. So it's around 8 in the morning. Her father's already gone for work. She's getting ready for school. Typical 16-year-old stuff. She takes her epilepsy medication, washes it down with a swig of whiskey. You know, didn't all 16-year-olds do that? So she's getting ready, and something about it just feels sluggish. And I don't blame her. Every Monday feels the same. But she just kind of takes a minute to like, I really don't want to have to go to school. And she's supposed to be going to Patrick Henry High to start her class.
Yep.
And instead she kind of sits down on the floor. She realizes that her gun is right next to the bed. And she sits close to the window. And at 8:30 a.m. decides to start playing the most twisted game of hunting you could ever imagine. And she takes her first shot at 9-year-old Cam Miller because he is wearing a blue sweater and blue happened to be her favorite color. So it just became attractive to the eye.
Yeah.
And then she realized that he was wearing a down sweater. And she started looking for other kids that were wearing similar fabric because she thought it was fun to see the feathers fly.
I can picture that, but it's just hearing that it's just very disturbing. It's incredibly disturbing to hear something that came out of her like, I just want to see the feathers go like fly.
Yeah, it just, all of it, just no. So Cam was hit in the back, and then the bullet went through his stomach and chest area. And then the next girl to get hit was a 9-year-old sweet little girl named Crystal. And she actually got hit in the wrist. Mary Clark was next, and she was shot through the lower torso, even though she didn't realize it through all the chaos. She knew she was hurt. She didn't exactly know the source. Like, it was kind of one of those where, like, you're taking everything in at once. Everybody's running. You see blood. You don't really know if it's yours or somebody else's. You're just trying to, like,
Yeah, there's a lot of chaos.
figure it out. Yeah. One student is quoted to say, Mike Simpson, and he says, "It's so clear in my mind what happened like it was yesterday." And this was 40 years later. He says, "The sway of the branches of the tree in front of the school, the blur of his schoolmates as they ran, and the terrible sound of gunshots." Like, I mean, that paints the picture as clear as you can get.
As a 9-year-old, like, I mean, you don't expect these things to even happen at that age. Like, you're so innocent. It's just wild to even think that this is going on. Like, you're experiencing this, and this is life-changing.
Well, the custodian starts to realize what's going on, and he rushes over to try to help get a child to safety. And while he's doing that, he's hit. The principal is over at the front door trying to rush students in to get them to the auditorium. And as he's proceeding to do that, he's hit as well. The next to get injured was Officer Rob. He was wounded in the neck. And then there was a patrol officer nearby who I think is like the unsung hero in this story. He thinks on his feet. He realizes there's a garbage truck coming around the corner. So he goes and he like waves them over, and they park it in front of the school to block all the bullets from coming in. So even if she keeps shooting, they're officially like this large mega shield.
Yeah,
for everybody.
It's like essentially a tank.
Yeah.
A brick wall.
Which I'm just amazed at like how quick thinking that was, and like amazed by that.
It's incredibly like back in the 78, 79, like you did not train for something like this. So like being quick on your feet and just realizing, oh, I have this big object to just shield. Amazing.
Yeah. To be able to see the big old picture in the middle of like all that chaos is amazing. In total, it was 36 rounds that were shot, which out of the 500, I feel like we're really lucky that she only used 36.
Yes.
It lasted for about 20 minutes, and it came to a halt when authorities arrived outside of the home.
Wow, that's crazy.
So what's, I guess, a twist in this is back in the day, in order to get, access to stories like this, news reporters would call homes in that neighborhood from like the Yellow Pages. And they would call anyone that was on that block and like try to get firsthand accounts of what they're witnessing. So when San Diego Union Tribune reporter starts to call around, and the third house he calls, Brenda picks up the phone.
Oh, wow.
And he's still thinking like, "Hey, are you okay?" And she's like, "Yeah, I'm fine." And he's like, "Okay." And he's like, "Do you happen to be able to see where the shots are coming from?" And she's like, "Oh, I know exactly where they're coming from." And then she repeats her address. And the way they're calling is they're matching the phone number to the address. So once he hears it, it takes him a minute to be like, "Wait, what?" Then he's like, "Oh my God, like this is a shooter." Like clicks.
Yes.
He's hit a gold mine. He's like, "What?" And so, and he's like, "Okay, he's what in the world?" And Literally. Then he's like, "Okay." So he told like, keep her on the phone line, keep her busy, like try to keep her on until we can get there. So he keeps talking to her, and he proceeds to ask her like, "Why are you doing this?" And she says, "I don't like Mondays. This livens up the day."
It's sick twisted to even just say that I don't like Mondays. You don't like Mondays? Okay, fine, but don't hurt anyone else over it. It's just wild. Like, I mean, and good for the reporter to have stayed on the line to try to see if like they could negotiate or see what she's been doing.
Well, he stayed on with her for quite a bit. Like she was still shooting as she was talking to him.
Oh, wow.
Because she saw cops coming to her door. So she started to shoot. And then she's like, "Hey, there's some pigs outside my house. I gotta go. Like, nice chat. Bye." And it was like, okay. So after that negotiation started, and obviously she was in the home alone. Dad was at work. They're trying to figure out.
Yeah.
So between negotiators, SWAT team, they had some neighbors come over and try to like reason with her, and nothing was working. 6 hours later, around 3 p.m., One negotiator offered her a Whopper.
A Whopper.
A Whopper.
Oh my gosh.
And then she decided to surrender.
Wow.
But I mean, like, she held out for 6 hours. That's a lot of patience that they're exercising. But
I mean,
again, they didn't know how much she had. She did threaten to come out shooting.
Yeah.
She said she had enough ammo to last her a week, which 500 rounds, she wasn't kidding.
Yep.
So, yeah, I think that they were just trying to like protect as many people as they could.
I mean, at that moment, I think the cops were like shoot to kill before the whole negotiation process, really.
Well, the last attempt they had was they're like, okay, either you surrender or we go in with tear gas and a SWAT team will bring you out. But like, there's no guarantee what's going to happen. And I think that between that and the Whopper, they convinced her to come out with hands up.
Oh, hands up. All right. That's just, that's just wild to even think that she, she was a minor and she killed, innocent
It's very
people.
ballsy for a 16-year-old.
Exactly. I'm like, wow. Like at that age, I wasn't even thinking about guns.
I don't think I even had the ability to answer back to my parents at that age, let alone a cop.
Yeah. So post incident, Brenda's been arrested. She's going through, through all the legal stuff, but nationwide and even through the world, they get news of this shooting. Now, what was really interesting is over in the UK, there was a band called the Boomtown Rats, and the singer heard about this incident in San Diego and how Brenda said, "I don't like Mondays." And what he did is they wrote a song that's called "I Don't Like Mondays." And this song became popular in the UK. It was the top #1 song for 4 weeks in a row, top 40 in the US, but here in San Diego, none of the radio stations played it.
Good. I mean, we've listened to the song and we'll share it with you guys, but it's nothing. I don't think he's glorifying it. I think he's just sharing the story in a song format.
Yeah.
But it still brought her fame and attention that was what she was originally looking for, which is why the city decided to not play it.
Well, yeah. And then on top of that, Brenda reached out to the singer and she told him, thank you for, basically acknowledging my name and giving me my fame and making me famous. And it's just like, what? This girl wanted to become famous and she did it, but you hurt people. Like you don't.
She went about it the wrong way.
Yeah, that's not the right way of becoming famous. That's just it is.
Wasn't it infamous when it's like bad fame versus good fame?
Yeah, exactly. So all in all, there were 11 victims. We had 8 children that were wounded, 1 officer, and 2 adults that were killed. The 2 adults that were killed were Mike Shkar, who was the head custodial janitor of the school. And then we also have Burton and Arthur Wags, who is the school principal. Now, I want to talk a little bit about Mike and Burton. So Mike is, he grew up in Ohio, in Youngstown and Kingsman, Ohio, which I really don't know where those areas are, but they're in Ohio.
If you're in Ohio, let us know if you know where they're at.
But he grew up here in California, in Campbell, which is just outside of San Jose. And then at an early age, he joined the military. He actually fought in World War II and also the Korean War.
Oh, wow.
What his role was is he was with the Seabees, which is a Navy battalion of mechanics. So that's what his background was. Okay.
That explains like the bravery and the ability to like jump into action.
Yeah, and just try to help. But what I found really interesting is that Mike and Burton didn't really get along very well. They didn't see eye to eye. But the day of the incident, Mike saw that Burton had been shot and he was laying on the ground and he needed assistance. So Mike went over to Burton and tried to save him. And in doing so, they both succumbed to being shot and dying right there on the spot, essentially. Now, that's like one of those things where you're able to put your feelings aside and help a person in need, which I think is amazing.
Yeah.
That he was able to be the adult and help the other person in need. And it's unfortunate they both died.
So Mike died on the spot,
Yes.
but Burton died in surgery a couple hours after the incident.
Yes. That later on, that's what it was shown. And he was shot like in the chest area. They were both shot pretty accurately.
Pretty crucial areas. Yeah.
So Mike and Burton, they were both family men. So Mike had a wife and he had a son. Burton was a husband and he was a father. So he had 2 sons and a daughter before the time of his death. Burton loved, camping, going to the mountains, spending time with his family. And the one thing I really enjoyed the most that he did was gardening, because that's like my background.
Aw.
So seeing that those kind of things is really awesome to hear of. And, he was just a devoted family man. But he also loved his job. Burton loved, having the students. He called them his kids because he saw them as his kids, and seeing these children every day just brighten his day. So he was very passionate of being the school principal. Now post incident, it's been said that Kathy, Burton's wife, and Penny, his daughter, they're both advocate to being at these parole hearings for Brenda to not be released, to keep her behind bars, because, later on we'll find out why. Since then, both Kathy and Penny have passed away, and both sons choose to stay out of the media light. They just don't want to get involved. They want to be respected, and we're all about privacy here, so it's like we don't fish for like those extra details of like what's their names and
But we talked about it before. Some people like feel tainted by a tragedy like this, and they want to be able to they battle with it every day, but they want to be able to like live a normal life.
Yeah.
And if you go publicly, you're only fueling that fire of people to like come and invade the little privacy you probably already have.
Exactly. So in 1983, Grover Elementary closed down. And then from 83 to 2005, I couldn't really find what the school really was used or not. But from 2005 to 2017, it was called Magnolia Science Academy for 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. Okay. And in 2000,
was that like a charter school? Yes,
it was a public charter school.
Okay.
Okay. So maybe like a magnet school, I would assume. 2018, the school and property were completely demolished, and a new housing development was built over that. It was like KB Homes was the property manager. So,
never heard of it.
Never heard of KB Homes? I know KB Homes.
I thought of KB Toys though.
KB Toys has not been around for like ages now. That's how old I am.
Yeah.
But the really cool thing though that the community development did was, so at the corner of these streets that's called Lake Outland and Lake Angela, they were able to make a memorial in memory of those affected of this shooting. So, and for Mike and Burton, there's a memorial plaque in place right in the corner, and the community pays into that to making sure that it's upkept. That's
so cool.
Yeah, and it's like, oh wow, okay, this is really awesome.
That's a really cool way to honor and remember them, and like not just let that be part of history.
Let that memory just fade away and just go into oblivion, right? So unfortunately, there's another thing that I found. So almost 10 years after the actual incident, so we're talking January 17th, 1989, up in Stockton, California, there was a Grover Cleveland Elementary School that also had a school shooting. Yes.
How does that even...
I don't know. And it's just like, wow.
I'm going to go on a limb and say we just stop naming schools Grover Cleveland Elementary, just to not jinx it.
I totally agree. So it's like, wow, the coincidence, right?
Well, if anybody out there is like me, wondering what happened to Brenda, what happened to Wallace, where are they now?
Yeah, like what was her trial?
Here's the tea. So, Wallace Spencer went on to marry Brenda's juvenile cellmate, who was 17 years old at the time. You heard me, 17.
That's wild. That's
crazy.
She
was a child bride. I mean, basically. Keep in mind, he was in his mid
40s, 50s
at this point.
Yeah.
So he married her. They had a child. And that child grew up in the same home that Brenda did. that same small little shack. And she ended up going to an elementary school that was right across the street. So she went to Glover Cleveland Elementary School. And the principal at that time was a former student of that elementary who also happened to be a survivor of that shooting. So she was very aware of like the last name, the address. Like, I mean, obviously she was, and she cared about the school. She knew the history. She wanted to make it a safe school for everybody. But it had to be weird to have this parent walking around that never took any responsibility for this.
It comes full circle.
It really was a full circle moment. And she mentioned that there was a point where like he did not ever interact with faculty. Like anything that had to do with like parent interaction was always mom. He never like, he would drop her off at school and he'd pick her up, but he'd never really go onto school grounds. And he'd like make sure to keep his distance. And I think part of it's like shame that he knew that people knew who he was.
Yeah.
And then one day the little girl goes up to the principal and goes, "Did you know that my sister's in prison?" And it just like that was that final nail in the coffin of like every suspicion you ever had or what you already knew
was there.
But like the elephant in the room's been called out by like a 6-year-old.
As wild.
That was crazy to me. I was like, how does that?
So Brenda, she went to trial, right?
So I'm going to finish on Wallace. He
okay.
died at the age of 87 in 2016. So not too long ago.
No, about 6
He
years
lived a pretty
ago.
full life.
9 years ago. Yeah. Wow.
So Brenda went on to face charges. She was tried. Her attorneys considered doing the mental illness aspect.
Yep.
Since she was going up as an adult, but then somehow just decided against it. And they ended up just going through it as a regular trial and she was found guilty. During her first parole hearing 25 years later, she alleged that her father had sexually abused her and that she was under the influence at the time of the shooting. So she even told them, like, if you don't believe me, check my toxicology report. So they went back and they checked her toxicology report. And the only thing she had in her system was that epilepsy medication she had already confessed to.
Mm-hmm.
And I think maybe a little bit of the whiskey, but it was a small shot. Like it wasn't anything where like completely impair her. And she claims that her lawyers rigged or changed the toxicology report in order for her to get convicted. Because they like didn't like her and they didn't want her out on the street. Which nobody wanted her out on the street anyways. So.
Exactly. But at the same time, like look at the things that you did. Look at the crime that you committed. Look what the harm you did.
But that's a pretty big allegation to say that like lawyers conspired against you and are switching evidence to like keep you locked up.
Yeah.
So then as far as the sexual abuse allegation, they say that during her entire time in prison and during all the psych evals that she did going up to trial, she never mentioned anything about sexual abuse. Mm-hmm. So for it to suddenly come up 25 years later and like no prior signs from any psychologist makes it really hard to believe.
Oh, totally.
So
agree.
it's like she's grasping for straws here.
Yeah.
So overall, those claims got dismissed. She ended up going for parole 5 times. And the first 4 got denied. The last one was in 2022.
Last year.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
And what do you think it was?
Oh, denied.
You sure?
Yeah. I mean, she
You
has
have that much faith in the justice system? Just kidding.
I feel like, yes, it's look at Gator.
True.
Well, then again, Gator got parole granted, but thankfully Newsom
It got revoked.
Revoked it.
So she ended up getting denied again. And her next appeal or her next meeting is set for 2025. But at this point, it seems like she's never getting out.
Yeah, because she's like what? She's at least already in her 50s, 60s?
60s. So she is now officially a golden girl. And I hate that they call it that. I feel like we need to rename that. But Golden Girl Club in prison or in the big house is when you are over the age of 55 and you can voluntarily participate as long as like all your ducks in a row, you're behaving, you're following your rules, whatever. Mm-hmm. And the perks of it are you can get your meals before everybody else. You can get your meds before everybody else. And you have more time to get to the yard and kind of enjoy like recess or whatever they call it.
Yeah. Well.
So she gets like these little perks where she gets a little more time, but it's not because she's doing anything great. It's just because she's been there so long and she's older.
Well, sounds like an amazing club to me.
I just think it's funny that like this was announced in 2020 that she got admitted into the Golden Girls Club. So I don't know if it's like a limited amount of people. Like, I don't know how that works.
Yeah.
But it just kind of came up. Wow. She did an interview in 1999 with CBS. And in that interview, she says that she feels that she may have some influence or part in the recent school shootings by setting a bad example and inspiring others. No duh. Like,
yeah. You know, we're creatures of havoc. So it's like we see something, we want that. Like you see a trend, you want to be part of that trend.
Well, yeah, you always hear of like copycat, murders or copycat serial killers or criminals where they just see something like, oh, I can do that better. And then they like want to one up it.
Yeah.
But I don't know if like by her not doing it, it would have never happened. I just think it definitely set a trend that made it easy and accessible and made an impact.
I agree with that.
Totally. She also says that she does not remember saying, I don't like Mondays. And she still stands by the statement, which is weird because like everybody coined her for it. Like that's how this case got recognized.
Yes.
So if she didn't say it, it's kind of like we followed and we hyped up this fictional statement, but I can't imagine anybody making it up. So I think maybe it's just a lapse of memory. I mean, she was 16 at the time and this was like 20 years later. So she also says that she still feels that the reason she was given the gun on Christmas is that her father wanted her to kill herself. Like she still believes that in her core that like that was the purpose for the gift, is that he was tired of like dealing with her being troubled.
Yeah, like daddy issues and stuff like that. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
More than anything, Brenda raised the question of nature versus nurture. Was she a natural born monster, or was she just this product of a really dysfunctional home who only absorbed abuse and bitterness and kind of just became that?
Well, I definitely feel like her upbringing and her poor, her childhood, those traumas, those incidences, the unstable home definitely brought this out.
But then there's some kids that go through a traumatic home and still have this little heart of gold, no matter how much they're put through.
And it's you tell yourself, even though you're the cards that you're dealt with, right? You're the one that makes those choices. You're the one that makes, you turn lemons into lemonade.
Yeah.
And she clearly became sour.
The fact that she found it very fun and that she was already 16 years old at the time, which is old enough to reason, and still found it fun to see kids, like she mentioned that they look like herding cows, or like they look like little ducks with the feathers.
Easy pickings, like those kind of terminology. Yeah, like definitely like that. It
shows the spite and the darkness that I don't feel is common in people, or I would hope is not common in people.
Totally. So our question to you guys is, do you think that she did this because of her disruptive upbringing or abusive home, or she was just like this because she is a natural born monster? So,
and do you believe that she started this awful trend of school shootings, or that she made it, that her actions played some responsibility in things like Columbine and Sandy Hook?
Totally.
Let us know what you guys think.
So now we've reached the end of our episode, and we have our SBS.
Small Business Spotlight.
So this week, we don't really necessarily have an SBS, but we have an organization that we want to share with you guys. And I think it's actually really cool. It does help out a lot of people. So Angie, take it away.
So considering Mother's Day is coming up, I think this is a really fitting organization to support. And it's Hope Clinic for Women. And it's located in Fallbrook. We'll be posting all of their information on our Instagram and our show notes. But the idea is they're doing a baby bottle campaign. So you pick up a bottle and you fill it up with change, bills, a check, and then you bring it back to the church. And those baby bottles get distributed to different families that are being supported by this nonprofit. And it literally anything you can give goes a long way. So we've seen it with GoFundMe's, or we've seen it with like stores that do like round up and give the change. Like even though you think it might be less than $1 and it doesn't have value, when everybody puts in just a little bit, it makes a huge difference.
Yeah. When you have all these different quantities add up together, it makes a huge difference. So whatever you can contribute, donate would be greatly appreciated. Yeah, I totally support these guys. Like, I'll definitely go pick up a bottle and fill it up with whatever I got.
And we do have some exciting small businesses coming up. So make sure you stay tuned. If you guys have some, please send them our way. We are working our way through a list. They're just all over the county, and we have to make sure that we like
Line
do
it
a
up
proper
correctly.
review. Yeah. I don't want to just like be like, oh, they're great. And like we didn't try anything. So
Yeah. So please DM us, like, share, follow our social medias, our YouTube channel, our
subscribe to our
Instagram.
YouTube. This was so huge for us, and we're so excited. So yeah, make sure you're subscribed to all our channels. Even if you don't listen on all of them, it really helps us out.
Yeah, we are very excited of our these next couple months for us, and we are so appreciative of your guys' support.
I'm like looking at you. I'm like, is there anything else? No. So like, share, follow, reviews, everything counts. And make sure to tune in every Monday for your next dose of Where in the World is Crime in San Diego. Till then, catch us on the next case.
And in case we don't see you, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.
Tell me, where in the world is
Crime in San Diego.